Hey folks, welcome to Good Story Live. It is Thursday, June 9th of 2022, and I'm here always here with the wonderful co-host extraordinaire, Ginger Crosby. Ginger, how are you?
Great, but are you always here, Jesse? Are you
Yes, I'm here now. I'm here now, thank you, and I'm going to be here for this show. I have every intention of having all technical things working correctly, so...
I'd love to have you here for the show.
Yes, just a guest. This is a guest appearance of Jesse on Good Story Live. So who knows, if he'll be here next week. We also have a Hollywood actor here today, which is very exciting. Neil Vanides, out in Hollywood right now. Neil, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing wonderful. It's beautiful out here. How are you?
I would expect it to be beautiful. Yeah, we're great.
I mean,
we can't
it's
wait
LA.
to talk to you.
Yeah.
You've got all these cool projects going on. You've been on Chicago Fire. You've done some movies. We're going to talk about all this cool stuff and what makes Neil Vanides Neil Vanides. Well, hopefully we'll get to the bottom of that question. What's the answer?
The Greekness.
The Greekness thereof, yes. All right, hang tight. We'll come back to you in a couple minutes, Neil. What do you say, Ginger? Should we get the show on the road?
Let's do it.
All right, folks, let's do it. Welcome, everyone, to this Thursday edition of Good Story Live. Hey folks, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Glad you could join us right here on Good Story Live.
I know,
Ginger,
for our
how
second
are you?
show. I'm wonderful.
It's nice to actually be here for the second show.
I'm so glad to have you here for the second show. It was so funny. In the moment, I was like, surely Jesse is never this quiet. There is no way if I ask Jesse for an opinion that he is not going to respond to me.
Jesse's very opinionated.
Yeah, I was like, surely. I was like, well, maybe, who knows? Maybe he's just having audio issues. Maybe he just can't hear me, but we just went with it.
Maybe he's having emotional issues. There's any number of excuses.
Yeah, it could be any number of things, to your point.
Any number of things. But I'm glad to be here now with you because there's so many things I'd like to talk about and not be having audio issues leading into
Actually be here to talk about them, right?
Right, to verbalize opinions, to formulate them and to communicate them effectively via means of the vocal tonation. You know where I'm going with that.
Yes, exactly, precisely.
By the way, kudos to you on the interview with Spence last week. It was great. Spence is a phenomenal musician, and he asked some great questions.
He made it very easy. He was a wonderful guest. It was lovely to get to know him. Everybody that I know that watched the show or watched the replay was like, oh my gosh, he's great. I was like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I met Spence a couple of times when I lived in Seattle. He actually was part of this event called Art on the Rooftop, which was kind of fun, where my friend would have artists of musicians and writers and painters who would come and have a little party on his rooftop. It was flat rooftop. We weren't like holding on for our lives. And
that's good.
I just wanted to create the visual. We're not talking A-frame here. And Spence played. He was the very first artist that was ever at Art on the Rooftop. And he was just so great. His songs are so peppy and happy. I encourage all of our viewers to go check him out. He's wonderful.
He kind of has like a almost like a Jack Johnson type vibe, that very like melodic kind of, I don't know, just kind of sucks you in. Also like a Sarah Bareilles vibe too. Like if you combine those two, for sure.
Absolutely. Some Sarah Bareilles in there. Someone, I had a description last week, which I would have mentioned had I been on the show. Someone described it. Oh yeah, this is it. I like this. Spence sounds as if Michael Bublé and Taylor Swift wrote a musical together.
And how appropriate, because we talked about Michael Bublé last week.
Bublé. And you're going to go see Michael Bublé soon.
Yes, I'm so excited. I love him. Oh my gosh.
Fantastic. Yeah, his music is phenomenal. I wonder if he'll do that thing where someone tosses him the microphone and he starts singing,
Probably.
And he always catches that. That amazes me. Like, does he ever not catch it? Like, oh, darn, we got to record that again. That would be my first question. Like, oh, missed it
Yeah.
by an inch.
Well, I've only been to one show thus far, so I can only answer that he caught it for that show. There was no resounding mic drop
That
throughout
would be
the.
like 90% of my practice time, my rehearsal time, not the music, just catching the microphone and starting. But
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But we're not here to talk
Sure.
about musicians on this episode. We're gonna get to
No.
our guest who's waiting in the wings here in a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Our Hollywood actor friend Neil Vanides is going to be joining us. It's very exciting.
Yes.
Tell us about what
Absolutely.
projects he's working on and what he's been up to, and what life
Mm-hmm.
is like in Hollywood, which I've been told is very rational and sensible and just very run of the mill, everyday sort of existence. What have you heard, Ginger?
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll
I'm
see if he
sure.
bursts our bubble on that, but that's my perception
Mm-hmm.
of Hollywood. So before we get to that, and speaking of movies, today's question, which we'll have a little more time to discuss this week.
Yeah,
I'm going to field this to you because it interfaces with both literature and film, which is a huge part of not only my life, but I know yours as well. And I was thinking about movies and the books on which they are based, and the adaptations that we love, and probably many adaptations that we despise. There's so many film adaptations of books that goes back, and this practice goes back to like the dawn of movies. I am shocked
Absolutely.
at how many black and white movies are adaptations of novels that were written in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. So
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about a movie that's a little further into the future.
Are you?
That's still in the 20th century. I know that's shocking to you that I'm not referencing the remake of Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, but not in this episode today. It'll be a little more modern.
Yeah.
I'll get to mine in a second. Do you want to go first, or should I start?
Oh no, I can start. Because I have some.
I'm very curious. I have no idea what yours is.
So I hated this question when you sent me this question.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie,
because I mean, most of them you hate, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yes. But my gosh, so I'm the person, right? I can love the book for what it is, and I can love the movie for what it is.
Yes.
But finding one where I feel like it was well represented, and one that I actually was like both. I really had to think about this. And no, it's not Twilight, though I know you can see the Twilight books from my
for sure we're going to give
days.
Stephanie Meyer answer here, but I'm very disappointed now.
No. So my answer is it's Pride and Prejudice, specifically I think it's 2005 remake with Keira Knightley, and I forget the gentleman's name. I love him though. Yeah, Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, because I love the book and I loved that adaptation. I loved the score, I loved the characters, I loved the actors that played them. So yeah,
we're going to dig into this because this is shocking. As someone who's a lover of classic literature, I have yet to read Pride and Prejudice. It's one of those classics I just haven't gotten around to yet. But I've heard that the film, both the novel and of course the 2005 remake, is excellent. So what specifically drew you in?
Gosh, I think it's a combination of everything. Like I love Keira Knightley, and I'm sure this was after Pirates of the Caribbean, of course, and like I said, growing up, it's funny. The more we've kind of gotten into this show and talking about Good Story Live, and I've mentioned this before to Jesse specifically, that after becoming a mom, my consumption of media in general has kind of shrunk, but I think about what I used to watch growing up and what I watch now. And growing up, I watched movies and I read books like Much Ado About Nothing, like Pride and Prejudice. I loved Audrey Hepburn and Katharine Hepburn. Like that was my genre of like and time period that I loved.
Love it.
Yeah. So I'm like really having to like comb through the archives, and just I'm a sucker for a love story. So there's that. That's probably why Pride and Prejudice, like I said.
I'm
That and like
thrilled to watch it now, and of course read it
oh,
eventually as well.
it's great. Both, and I feel like, and you can share your opinion on this. I'm sure you'll have one again.
Yeah.
It's different adapting a novel or a film or a novel, right? I'm gonna say all like sci-fi and fantasy to film
Yes.
compared to adapting a fantasy or sci-fi or something that requires a little bit more imagination or when you're reading it, because there can be so many scales of gray when you adapt when you adapt that to a film.
Agreed.
And I think that's why also that specifically is one of those novels turned film that I can really appreciate, because though I created the world in my head when I was reading the book, it felt very familiar when I watched the film.
And was there a point in the movie, and I think we've all felt this when we're watching a film based on a book that we really liked. Was there a point where you're like, I really like this movie. I'm terrified that they're going to mess this up at a certain point. And there's that apprehension the longer it's going well, and you're holding on for the climax because you're like, if they still could ruin it, there's still time.
Oh yeah,
and then
there's still time. I feel that more. I've never thought about that. I feel that tremendously when I'm like going into it. And then I start to think about it more as, like you said, like as I'm watching the time kind of like tick down and I see that we're coming to the close of the story. I'm like, wow, this is still really good. And there wasn't, like I said, there wasn't that point in that film for me where I was like, man, they really missed the mark with this. To me, it was all, like I said, I really enjoyed it from cradle to grave, essentially.
That's great.
Yeah.
From opening
but
credits
there are
to end
not,
credits.
yeah, there are not many where that has happened for me. What about for you?
Mine is controversial because the
Ooh.
vast majority of there is a very powerful community online that despise this movie. All right. However, I love the film. I think it's a masterpiece. There, I said it. So
wow.
let the vitriol.
I'm wondering if have I even seen it?
I don't read the comments anyway. I don't read the vitriolic comments. So write whatever you want. But seriously here, the novel I'm going to mention, it is 20th century, but it's late 20th century. It's the novel's from 1987. And the film came out, adaptation, 11 years later, 1998. I know math.
I was going to say,
1 year later, they were fast. 11 years later, 1998. And I'm talking about the movie Sphere. Have you ever seen the movie Sphere?
No, I have not.
Okay. So it was based on a novel by Michael Crichton, who's one of my favorite sci-fi writers.
We were just talking about Michael Crichton, my husband and I, this morning. So it's funny that this is, yeah, we were.
Writer of Jurassic Park, Timeline.
That's exactly what we were talking about. He's like,
So many
there's
ones.
Jurassic Park, but I haven't read the book. I'm like, yeah. No,
The Great Train Robbery. I've read so many of his novels. Big fan. Prey. So, I mean, yeah.
So Sphere.
Really good ones. Sphere is my favorite Michael Crichton novel and my favorite film adaptation. Although I really love Jurassic Park, but that's kind of in its own thing because I was a millennial, and let's just be honest, that transformed all of our lives when we saw it.
My sister, my youngest sister, she was like 5, loved Jurassic Park. And I'm not my oldest, I'm the oldest, my middle sister, she would lock us in the bedroom with her so we couldn't get out and watch Jurassic Park.
You were traumatized at an early age.
Yeah.
By the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I think a lot of children, Steven Spielberg was very smart in the way that he filmed it, because a lot of children under the age of 13 saw that film and they capitalized on that in the toy market brilliantly. But anyway, let's talk about Sphere. So Sphere is a story that came out in 1987, written by Michael Crichton. And I always, before I get into what the story is, I always have a heart as a fellow novelist, as a fellow writer. When people ask Crichton how long it took him to write Sphere, he always says, well, I don't really know how to respond to that, because in a way it took like 20 years because he was mulling over this idea and this concept, but he couldn't quite find the right plot to drive it. And then once he figured out the plot, it only took a very short period of time, which is very similar to my novel in the
Right.
period of time that it took. But that's a story for another day. So Sphere is a story about a group of researchers, scientist, psychologist, mathematician, I think a biologist, who go down to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean to investigate a mysterious spaceship that has crash landed at the bottom of the ocean.
Okay.
And they figure out, based on the rate of coral growth, which is about an inch a year, that this ship has been down there for about 300 years. So they're like, that doesn't quite add up. So the story unfolds as to the mystery, the origins of this spaceship, and what they find on the spaceship, still running, still operating in this container room, this cargo hold, is the titular Sphere, this giant sphere that has no voice, no real identity. It has a texture to it, but that's about it. The only odd thing they notice about it is that it reflects everything in the room except for them. And that bothers them right off the bat, especially the psychologist. Or let's see, is he a psychiatrist or psychologist? Forgive me for not remembering that. I think I remember him mentioning that he wrote a prescription, so it must be psychiatrist. Anyway, the point is, the story unfolds into a psychological thriller about the nature of human imagination. And it is very much a character-driven story, which even I will admit is not Michael Crichton's strong suit. And he admits that as well. His characters are very cut and paste from one book to the next. He's very much a plot-driven writer. Sphere is a standout from his work in that the characters are very well fleshed out, and the things that happen to them matter psychologically, and the way that they react to them makes a tremendous amount of sense. So that's the novel. The film on which it was based came out in 1998. It starred Dustin Hoffman, Sharon Stone, and Samuel L. Jackson.
What a great cast.
Great cast. It was directed by Barry Levinson, who I love. Barry Levinson directed Rain Man and Disclosure and a whole bunch of great films. This was like his first foray into science fiction. And a lot of people despised the movie. They just thought it did poorly as an adaptation. They thought that the graphics were poor, which I will admit there's some weak graphic points to the movie. But I think the movie's a masterpiece. I really do.
Really, a masterpiece is a strong word.
It is a strong word. I'm going to defend that right now.
Okay. I'm
going to defend that.
All right.
It's a masterpiece in the concept of cinematography, first of all, because some of the things that they have to film are abstract. They're hallucinations. And the way that the cinematographer, and to some extent the director, filmed them, by moving the camera, shifting it left and right, or having someone's face in the upper left-hand corner and then moving away as if someone would like catch a peripheral glimpse of someone, but be focused then on something else. The way they film those scenes, if you really study it, are truly amazing. And the breakdown, the unfolding of the story, and I admit there's a kind of late center part that falls apart for a little bit, but it redeems itself at the end. And I think it's worth a watch. It's a great mixture of a very intelligent script, very funny at times for a psychological thriller film, and just A-list acting that really brings a depth to these people that you really care about at certain points where they themselves are being tested. A very intelligent film. It doesn't insult the viewer. And I would encourage everyone to read the book and watch the movie. And it doesn't matter which one you do, because although some
like
things
both.
might be revealed, you'll like both. And there are substantial differences from the book and the movie. So,
interesting.
That is my unconventional answer to this, which I was going to go way back. I was going to go back into talking about a 1950s story or something. But
that's where I totally thought you were going to go. It's interesting listening to you talk about it. I am very much in my consumption of whether it's film or shows, whatever it might be. I take it in as a whole, and I don't pay attention to those small nuanced things, like how the director is capturing it, the cinematography of it.
Yes.
But I know that there are so many people that really love that. And I'm sure if you're in the business, like we're going to be talking to Neil, who's in the business, or he'll have an opinion on it as well.
Oh yeah.
I would love for you guys that are watching in the comments to let us know if either of ours are your favorite or what your favorite might be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you have a favorite book to film adaptation.
And one point on your comment is that I think a lot of people watch a film and be like, that was phenomenal. I loved it. And maybe they can't articulate why.
Yes.
Maybe it was the soundtrack, maybe it was the script, maybe it was the cinematography, and they just weren't putting all those, breaking it down to its small levels.
Components, yes.
Yeah. But
Absolutely.
at the end, they just know that I will remember that for a long time. And the people like me who are fascinated by the infrastructure of a story will break it down and be like, that was very strong. That was very strong element, and so forth. So, yeah, there we go. So we have Pride and Prejudice and Sphere.
Yes,
that is not what people would have expected from the two of us today. So
no, well, I feel like mine is pretty, maybe not.
I totally thought you were going to do Twilight. Got to be honest.
No, I did not like, though I can appreciate the films. I did read the books, and I enjoyed the books, and I enjoyed the films, but it wasn't my favorite adaptation from one to another.
Okay.
I don't feel like they translated well.
Got it. All right.
But I could enjoy them both.
Good to know. Well, we'd love to hear your comments, folks, and read your comments. So feel free to write them out or send us an email. You can send us an email.
Please. Absolutely.
hello@goodstorylive.com. Oh, I hear the music in the background. That means we have to go to a break.
Yes.
We have to take a break. I don't know why. We have to pay our bills here with commercials. So we'll be back in just a minute. We're going to bring on Neil Vanides, who's patiently waiting in the green room right now. We're excited to talk to him about his life in Hollywood.
Yes.
And we'll get back to him, right after the break. So stay tuned. This is Good Story Live.
We built a portal connecting the Earth and the Moon.
This could end the space race before it's even begun. Your daughter is up on the Moon, and we can't get her down.
A stowaway? Alaire's a good kid. Why would she do something so reckless?
Maybe she's looking for something. Or someone.
Who? There's no one else up on the Moon.
What if there is?
Welcome back to Good Story Live. Ginger, what do you say? Should we just bring Neil in and start talking to this Hollywood actor?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Neil, great to talk to you. It's been a while.
It has. It's been ages.
You two know each other, right?
I forgot. We should have opened with that.
You two know each other.
That's disclosure. That's the disclosure part of this interview, is that I know Neil Vanides. I've worked with him on some plays many, many years back when he lived in Milwaukee.
Yes, this is true. We worked on World of the Blind together.
Yes. The Wells adaptation. Yep.
I actually had one of the folks from that show message me on Facebook 2 days ago. And they said, my mom found in the basement. And it was the eye cover. Make it look like their eyes were closed so that they could actually
Those were terribly uncomfortable. I mean, they gave me a rash there for like days.
I bet. I didn't have to wear one, luckily. But,
you didn't, because you were the guy who could see, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah. You and I worked on several plays together, and then you had this dream of going out to Hollywood, of of doing all these amazing things. First, let's give the audience who you are. So you're living in LA right now. A few highlights from your career. You've had a couple of episodes on Chicago Fire, which is a great show. You were a core stand-in on the HBO series The Flight Attendant, which I love. Kaylee Cuoco, big fan. You've been in many different, low-budget films and some with bigger budgets. And most recently, you've contributed to a project on Netflix. So we want to know about all of that. We have a lot of questions. But kick us off with this first. How did you decide to pursue a career in Hollywood?
I'm crazy. No, you have to be a little crazy. So I've been acting for a while. Like you can see behind me, I have a blue screen. This is actually what I use for my acting classes. It moves, and then there's curtains, acoustic curtains behind it. But I've been pursuing acting since I was like 13, and now I'm 36. So for 23 years. Wow.
That's good math.
Better than Jesse did earlier.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I'm not clocking my hours very well on television, but we'll get there later. Please continue.
All right. So I started acting, just doing like plays in school and little sketches, and I liked it. I thought it was a cool thing. I mean, I moved around a lot when I was younger, so this was a good way for me to like have instant friends when I would change schools. You get involved in drama club. Everybody is working together with you every day. It was great. And I realized after a while that no other extracurriculars really spoke to me. Like I was in choir for several years. I did musicals and musical theater and dinner theater, which is different. And it was interesting. I like performing, but didn't really fancy myself a singer. And so I kept doing the acting on the side. And then I went to college and I was like, well, I'll be an architect. So I started out as an architecture major. And while I was doing the program, there was a little board outside the Peck School of the Arts that said, auditions, a cosmic web. And I was like, is this a Spider-Man play? What is this? So like I went in to see. It was not a Spider-Man play. It was a play written by a woman named Robin Mello, who's amazing. She works at UW Milwaukee still. I think she's the head of the department now. And this was a play for NASA to teach kids about the Hubble Space Telescope and the Hubble Space, or the NASA space program in general, and about the history of how they were taking the telescope down and maybe decommissioning it or maybe petitioning to keep it up in space. And so I ended up auditioning for this show, and I got one of the lead roles, which played 5 different characters. It was a very small cast.
But not simultaneously, right?
Well, quick
changes. I remember those days, yeah. You're standing there in your drawers, and you're like, I just need someone to hand me something.
Yeah, and so after this show, which we toured, we went to schools in the Midwest, I was just like, yeah. No, this is who I am. I'm not an architect. I'm going to do this. And so I went to the acting program, which at that moment had just transitioned from the PTTP, Professional Theater Training Program, to the acting BFA, auditioned to get into the core conservatory program, got that, and then started basically mapping out how am I going to go from an unknown theater actor in the Midwest to California. And, life happens, so there were delays. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would, but I finally landed here in 2017. And
I remember following you on that journey, your journey west from Wisconsin, and meeting up with some people. And
yeah. It was interesting. I almost thought I was going to get abducted by aliens. That was terrifying.
Really?
Yeah. 3 days. I drove nonstop from Wisconsin to California. I didn't at a hotel or anything.
You did not?
No. So delirium set in driving for over 36 hours. And I went through, I believe in Nebraska, there was this like cornfield. And they, at some point at night, all of a sudden, they had all these power towers that just start lighting up red. and you're driving through them in pitch black because there's no street lights. So you don't see that they're there. And so all of a sudden I'm on the road to California trying to make it as an actor. And I'm like, this is it, man. This is it. Manifest destiny. I'm an obit, man. Here we go. And then the sky just turns red.
I'm gonna
So suddenly you were in Close Encounters
Oh
of a
my
Third Kind.
gosh.
Basically.
I
Yeah.
was. It's like,
I could just imagine like the panic, especially having been up for that long, right? Driving, making that
Yeah.
drive. You're just like,
Ugh.
oh my gosh, what's happening right now?
Wow.
It was brutal.
All
But
right.
then I took a look
Yeah.
around, collected myself, pulled over, thinking like, I
Mhm.
don't flip if they abduct me, you know. And then I'm like, no, wait, aliens aren't real. Maybe I what time is it? I
Yeah.
haven't slept in 2 days. These are power towers. They're just the red lights that go at night so planes don't hit them. Okay. And then I made it here.
Mm.
But
So
don't drive.
I think that's everyone's acting story going out to Hollywood is just, you know, they getting freaked out by strobe lights is just a predetermined thing at that point because of the journey.
But you get
yeah.
decent eventually, and then you go.
So
Wow.
so forgetting the drive to LA, what was it like making that transition from the Midwest to now living in LA full time?
Culture shock.
Yeah.
It was like I'm a friendly Midwestern guy. So still when I walk down the street, if I see someone, I'll smile at them or say, how you doing? Hey, howdy. You know, they don't do that here. You're like not supposed to look at people or make any sort of human connection unless you're in like a spin class. So it's
That's very LA, very LA.
yeah, like I remember walking past someone once and I was like, and they were like,
What are you
and
doing?
like,
Making-
oh dude, look at me. And I was just like, there's something on me, you know.
Mhm.
But then the big changes after that are just pacing and the
Yeah.
lack of community. Because in the Midwest, you have community.
Mhm.
Everyone there is just like, even if you don't like your neighbor, you know their life story and they know yours.
Mhm.
Here, not the case.
Now I have a question that's gonna veer a little bit. So Atlanta, right? You made the choice to go to LA, which I understand, like LA is the hub for acting, but I feel like Atlanta is kind of making a run for. There's a lot of filming and production that goes on in Atlanta, and you might not know the answer to this. Does that whole process start out there, um, or are people kind of because I feel like Atlanta, you'd get far more of the people that are going to smile back at you. Maybe not in the city
Oh,
center, but
it's very
was it?
different. Here was
Yeah,
like, I know what you're getting at. So while
yeah, okay, yeah,
for one, I'm
mhm,
36, so Atlanta wasn't that place that I dreamed about as a kid. It didn't.
I get that.
It wasn't a film hub or television hub at all at the time. And
Mhm,
so there were promises I made myself growing up. Like I'm gonna go to
mhm,
Hollywood. I'm gonna do it in Hollywood. And I'm glad I chose Hollywood over Atlanta because of a few things. For one, the people here have been doing what they do for ages. So their
mhm,
reputations are known. Like if I ask my agent, hey, I'm going to check out this acting coach, they know if it's a scam or not. They'll say
Oh
to me,
yeah.
mhm,
why them? Like go here, or go here. These people have been around forever. So there's that safety and security and like, okay, this is established. And then
yeah,
also, I hate humidity. I bought a car in Atlanta once. It was a Mitsubishi Eclipse. It looked great.
yeah.
Then I drive home, all the paint started flaking off from the change in air quality.
I believe
Um,
it.
yeah,
Wow.
a car that's acclimated to a very humid area and you drive it very quickly through hot air in a dry area,
Mhm.
the paint will just come off. And it did. And I was like, I don't want to live there.
I
Car-
Ginger's afraid that's now like the thing for her state. You know.
yeah, that's what you're going to make us known for. I could see that coming from like, I would suspect, or could maybe conceptualize that coming from like Florida, driving to another state because you've got the salty air all around you, and that affects cars very differently. But I wouldn't have thought of that. But I totally understand. And good for you for like following through and sticking to your, again, initial dream of, I'm gonna go and do this in Hollywood. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So speaking of flaky car paint, because I think that this would be a good question to pose as well. When you're talking about roles, how's that for a segue? When you're talking about roles, how do you determine what type of role you're going to want to take? Because much like the paint that flakes off of a car, you might think that something is one thing, but once you get it out into the sun and you test drive it and you're in reality, it's something entirely different. And as an actor, how do you vet some of that ahead of time?
Okay. That's a great question. I feel like if I were more established in the industry, so like if people knew my name right away, I would probably think about that question a lot more.
Okay.
What I get is, I'll show you because this is old. This is just from an acting class, so it's not confidential or anything.
But Ginger, Neil's opening up the archives. This is really...
When you get an audition, this is what they tell you. You get 3 sentences.
That little highlighted, yeah.
And that's all you know about your character. You don't know the arc over 3 seasons or 4 seasons, what's going to happen. And you maybe get 2 sentences telling you the actual synopsis of the show. And so deciphering what's good for me, what's bad for me or whatnot, you have to do what acting coaches call be a detective. And what that means is you look at the writers and creators of the show, the directors, and you, what are their styles? What do they usually work on? Is it gritty? Is it with my brand? Is it going to be like HBO intense? Is it going to be like really lewd and inappropriate? You know, some shows have nudity in every single episode. Some shows have drugs every single episode. So it's like you kind of figure out with those directors and those networks, when you see what little blip you get in there, like, can I do this and will I actually be good at it and enjoy it?
Do you feel like...
I was going to say, you only accept scripts where there is nudity, right?
Every single time. No.
I overrode you. Sorry. I had to insert that joke there. Ginger, please continue.
I know you did. Oh, no, I know you did. I know. I was going to say, I was going to ask, do you feel like you have now started entering a phase where you can identify that, or are you still in that learning phase of identifying like, oh, okay, this is what this role might be, and does it help you get a little bit more prepared for when you read those 3 or 4 lines that you have in your audition?
Well, it gets easier like once you join SAG. So I'm a member of the SAG-AFTRA union, and once you join that, productions have to state on the audition notice requires nudity, sexual situations involved, implied sexual situations involved, drug use, you know, so like they make sure that like you're not triggered at the audition or one day on set, because they're like, hey, we warned you, like this is something that the show deals with.
Is that something that only being a union member and the SAG-AFTRA member actually provides for you, or all production studios have to disclose that information?
Well, that statement is the trick in itself. So without a union, there is no one setting the rules. Like when you do a non-union production, it's no man's land. Anything goes. Like you signed up for what you signed up for. There's no agency that's going to hold them accountable to any other standards. So that's like one of the main reasons to go in for a union and like to pick your union well, is because they're the ones who advocate and set the structure for what your day is supposed to look like.
Got it. Were you able to get that role on Chicago Fire through your connections there, or how did that happen? Because I watched, I think you were on 2 episodes, and it was tremendous fun to see you.
Well, so Chicago Fire, I booked when I lived in Chicago. Well, I lived between Milwaukee and Chicago. I was helping take care of my grandfather, who lives in Melrose Park, Illinois, which is 5 minutes from Chicago. And I lived in Whitefish Bay, which is in Wisconsin. So I would drive like an hour back and forth every couple of weeks, take turns living in places. And I'm blessed. I was immensely blessed to sign on with this agent during a blizzard in Chicago. They were called Gil Hayes Talent. Now they're just called Hayes Talent and Gil Talent. There's 2 agencies now. Hayes Talent is the one I stuck with, Michelle Hayes, who's amazing. And she brought me in, and my first audition was for a commercial. And I booked it. And so after I booked my first audition with this lady, and it was a national commercial, she was like, all right. And she just kept submitting me to these shows in Chicago, because there's like 4 of them. You know, there aren't a ton of shows in Chicago. But she kept submitting me, and I got discouraged after a while, because it was like, they're not using me. You know, maybe they hate me. But and like, I had an audition for this really meaty role, which was to play like a Bulgarian hitman. And it would have been like dick. Like, the audition was so fun. I remember I kicked open the door for the audition and walked in screaming, you know. But then the audition, I'm like, I nailed it. The actor in me was like, yes.
You're like, I got this.
And the next guy is a Bulgarian with a scar across his eye. Straight up, probably was in some sort of like rogue military operation. And I was like,
yeah.
The role, because it's the one role he was meant to play. But then they put me in, and eventually I got one of them was to play this like taco chef who gets cyanide poisoning, and they have to come in and save me. Fun one. And then they would bring me around for like smaller background things, just because they like working with me, and they're like, oh, okay, he was professional, he knows. Like, I actually was one day with the lead actors on that set. They just brought me in, they were like, can you be on book? Just make sure. And I was like, okay. Like, they give people opportunities in Chicago, which is cool.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. And, you know, I'm curious, because you mentioned, you know, that your agent was kept submitting you, right? And it's kind of like, you're like, gosh dang it. Like, it feels, I don't know if you can tell me, it's not criticism, but gosh, I imagine also in the role that you're in, right? Being an actor, you can get a lot of criticism. Or have you reached that point where you feel like you're getting, oh yeah, I see those eyes? You're like, yeah.
So criticism is,
how do you handle it?
It's a bad word for it. It's
wrong.
In our industry, it's not criticism, it's direction. If someone doesn't like what you're doing, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong as an actor. It just means that's not what their vision for this was, based on their directing style. And sometimes the casting director sees things totally different from the actual director. And so then you'll get on set, and it's like, nope, throw that out the window. We saw that you could play, but we want you to do it totally different. So you're never wrong as an actor for trying something. You're only wrong if you can't try something else.
That's a good philosophy. I like that.
You have, because it's called play acting, right? Like, play. Right. We're supposed to be playing. And
it sets the tone, I would imagine, for the rest of the production and the type of interaction you think you're going to have with director and the rest of the crew.
Oh yeah, you can't be adversarial with your director. Like, if everyone wants everyone to succeed on set, because the sooner everyone succeeds, the less long your day is going to be. The sooner you can go home and be with your family. The sooner you can eat and sleep, you know. So, like, I was working on the HBO show, The Flight Attendant, and I was a core stand-in for that. And so I wasn't.
I'm a big fan. I'm that's so cool that you were a stand-in in that.
I watched every episode when it came out. It was a great show. Oddly satisfying, even to stand in and not actually do the acting, because I got to watch all of the pros and see how at the top level what a day goes like how everything goes and how everyone is. And it's interesting, because I wasn't a top level actor doing it. I was somewhere in the murky middle lower tier, right? Like, I'm a stand-in. I'm just a level above being in the background. Yeah. So no one's like, oh, hello, Neil. You know, they didn't even know I was an actor. Like, some directors don't associate that background actors and stand-ins are actors who are just like doing this until they get acting work. Wow. So it was really fascinating to like watch without them realizing I was watching, you know, and like just be a part of that process.
Yeah. I was going to say, how cool is it that you do get to, I mean, essentially be a fly on the wall and see, again, as you said, all of these top level, right, people in their field I have to imagine that that just felt like, again, like, am I supposed to be here? I don't know, but I'm gonna be here as long as I can, and just kind of
That's the trick though. Once, like, if you're doing your homework as an actor, like I'm
Mhm.
going to acting classes constantly. I've worked with several different coaches in LA. Like I have my degree, you know. Um, it's the opposite. Instead of being overwhelmed, like, oh my God, I don't belong here, I was like, I could totally do this.
Oh,
Why was
wonderful.
I so
Yeah.
Yeah.
afraid that I wasn't ready for Hollywood? Like Hollywood is just more cameras, like better cameras. Like I already do all the other stuff.
Huge
Like
Mhm.
confidence builder. Yeah.
it
Yes.
it actually is, especially when you're like sitting at lunch and one of the leads comes up to you and they're just like, yeah, what's that? What was that? And I'm like, oh, it's the spinach artichoke dip. For it in the back. And they're like, man, thank you. You know, like that was what made their day. There's
Yeah.
artichoke. His name is Manny. And so like you're like, yeah, they're not stressing about like, did I get this right? Did I do this right? And you watch them get directed. Like watching Kaylee Cuoco get
Mhm.
directed by someone else on a show she's producing and starring in. Uh, if she can handle someone being like, I didn't like that,
Mhm.
and you do it this other way, we should all be able to handle that because she's like up here. I mean, I've also worked with another Big Bang Theory star, Mayim Bialik. I worked on a show called Call Me Kat, just doing background work. You know, I wasn't
Yeah.
like hoity-toity, but watching how they operate with their teams is like the big thing that people don't think about. When you're an
Mhm.
actor, you need to have all your work done before you get there because your job on set on the day is to do what the crew needs you to do so that they can do their job. Like you've got cameras that need to capture you. Like there aren't
Mhm.
a ton of rehearsals for film actors on TV. Like you show up, you do your first run and your first rehearsal, and that's basically just so that they can block you and let the stand-ins take your place. And then Neil came in, you know, and you're watching your stand-in to see where your marks are and your pacing, and then you
Mhm.
go do it. Like that's it. There aren't like
Wow.
20 for a TV show usually, you know. There's like
Mhm.
3 per shot maybe. And once you're in the habit and you've worked with the director, maybe 2. You know, you get a safety. That's it. So
Do you
watching that,
find I was just say like once you've had a lot of experience with different types of sets and different types of productions, do you find that you as an actor gravitate more for one toward another? Like you did voiceover work for a Netflix show called Ethos, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
And that would be an entirely different interaction with a set and with a production. Do you find that you naturally, as an actor, gravitate toward one more than another?
no. I'm one of these people who I don't like monotony. So mixing things up is really fun for me. Like when I'm not acting or doing voiceover work, I'm working on cars or I'm doing a carpentry project.
Oh,
I
yes.
think that's really healthy and good because it keeps everything fresh and it gives you different perspectives. So like when you're doing voice acting, like when I was working with Netflix, the studio I worked with was called Studiopolis. And the guy who owns it is awesome. He's really passionate. And the people he hires are very good people, like salt of the earth people, where like you want to be family with them, you know? And so I was working with these folks and I would come in. Sometimes I would work in this room, which is why it's all interesting. I mean, I've got soundproofing on that wall, a bunch of lights, my monitors, you know, all this stuff.
We
But
assumed you were on
Yeah.
set the whole
I
time. I
know.
mean,
this is my home set, and I built it for
give a
Netflix.
weather report or something.
I
Could you
actually built
imagine?
it for them because during the pandemic, doing voiceover work was scary. Because if you
Yeah.
think in an incubator with your director, producer, and voice talent, and if they have like
Mhm.
10 people coming in the day, they're exposing themselves 10 times to, you know, what we didn't know at the time. So it was
Right.
terrible. So they would have me come in on days where it was just me, and I would go in the studio and
Mhm.
record with like 2 people, and we're all like, "How was your life? Oh my God, this pandemic. Oh, are you doing okay? Has anyone in
Mhm.
your life been, you know? Okay, let's do this." And then we would get to the thing, and we would do our work, and you focus so differently on voiceover work because it's just one thing
Mhm.
than you will on acting, but it helps your acting because you're like, I haven't been focused as much on my breath work. I haven't been using lines as much as when I do voice work. So now I need to incorporate that, but still laser it in so that it's believable and not too theatrical. Unless you're working multicam, you know, then you can keep it. So it was really neat to have that reminder of like, oh yeah, I need to take advantage of the breath work and Alexander work and all that, you know.
It's amazing how life provides those opportunities for you to like zero in on what you different areas to focus on. And gosh, it only takes being aware enough to recognize that, oh, this is an opportunity. You know, going back to you talking about criticism, it's not really criticism, it's taking direction, right? What a paradigm shift it is for all of those moments, and how any moment can become an opportunity to hone a skill, right? And I was thinking about it because I've done, like, I used to do tutorials. I used to create tutorials for companies that were for software, and I would do the voiceovers, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm thinking and saying, oh yeah, like I remember that. You do have to be very mindful of all of those things as you're doing that.
Oh yeah.
And it's so specific.
Yeah, I remember my first voiceover gig. This kid from Milwaukee reached out to me and he was like, yo, I'm doing like this insurance website and I need like a really corporate voice, but like friendly and warm. And I was like, well, those are different, you know. We sat in his dad's garage and recorded like a whole bunch of takes. Orange colored blue brand Yeti cardioid condenser microphone, a little mud buck. And we're sitting there and I'm like going at it in his garage. And I remember it was freezing. So I was like shivering so you could hear it in my breath. We had to do like 30 takes just so I would be warm enough so I wasn't shaking my voice. And after the first time I was like, oh, I could do better. I could do better. There's this place called Video, Wisconsin. Or no, Video, Milwaukee. Carol, what is her last name?
This is the shout out. Prepare yourself, Carol.
Yeah.
Carol. I won't say her last name so people don't blow up.
Carol is screaming at her screen right now.
No, Carol's probably retired in Boca by now, but she worked too hard for too long. But she took me into her studios for a series of opportunities, and I didn't get them because she was a pro who started a studio here in Milwaukee after wanting to retire. And that made me realize, like, yeah, no, it's not criticism. Even with voice work, it's not criticism. It's like you're an instrument. Your body is an instrument. Your voice is an instrument. You have to be able to hone it in and play the right notes. And so if you're playing a note that is your favorite note, like this is C, you know, and someone's like, yeah, but I need a G right now. And you give me a G, like, C was bad. It's just not what they needed, you know. And she taught me a lot about that because she said, you need to be able to play with the wetness and dryness of your mouth. You need to be able to play with the warmth and coolness of your sound. And I was just like,
yeah, I can imagine. Like,
it's a voice, you know, like at first, this is my sound, you know.
Yeah.
But there are people
like,
here,
what do you
like,
mean?
I met gorgeous, amazingly talented people who you would never guess are voice actors. You'd think they're supermodels. There are these girls who look like Barbie.
Yeah.
And they do the voice of Tommy Pickles, you know?
Oh, yes.
What? Tara? All these guy voices? Like, you know, it's crazy. And so you're like, wow, okay, I can do more with
That's the shock of every animated show ever, is what these what these actors actually look like, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Or he did Fry from Futurama. Like, this guy does like a million voices. And he looks like, I don't know, kind of like Paul Simon. Like, you would never guess that this guy.
And Bob's Burgers is the most shocking. The characters. I mean, half the females are played by men. It's so funny how they And that movie's out right now. I haven't seen it yet. I'm very excited.
No, I
Neil,
haven't either.
we only have a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to make sure we got this question in right before. What advice would you give to a young Neil Vanides like yourself, back in Milwaukee, back in Iowa, back in the East Coast, wherever, who wants to follow in your footsteps and go out to LA and give it a shot, knowing that there's no guarantee in life, right? But they think they have a dream. They think they have some talent to share. What do you tell them?
If you're going to go while you're marketable. Don't wait until you're ready, because you're never going to be ready. There's no such thing as perfect. Just make sure you have money, because LA is one of the most expensive places in America to live. Make sure you have some sort of community that you set up right away. If you're thinking about moving to LA and you are thinking you have a budget and you want a community, one place I would recommend is called Upstart. It's a good place for artists to kind of move into like student housing.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be a kid. And that's where I started out. I met like 32 people my first day here and watched what they did. So pay attention to your community. See what they're trying that works and see what they're trying that doesn't.
Got it.
And
I think that's good advice, right, Ginger? I mean,
Yeah,
Ginger's
I
ready
do.
to just pack it up and head to LA.
Could you imagine? No. Do we have time for one more question?
Do you have time, Neil? We have like a minute left.
I do. Go
for it, Ginger.
Do you find, you mentioned that place Upstart. Do you find that in the communities that you create that there are people that are willing to create those communities, or do you find it very competitive?
It's not as competitive as it is narcissistic. So I've tried helping people before, and then when I needed help, they were gone. And that's been the story of my life since I moved to LA. I've had to learn to become very self-sufficient, because people put a lot at stake, put a lot at risk.
Yeah.
And so when push comes to shove, it's all about me is what I've learned from people out here.
And that makes sense.
But that's the way it is.
Yeah. But we come from, I get that. So thank you so much for taking the time to answer that last question for me. Because as soon as you mentioned that, I was like, I wonder.
You meet great people, though. You do.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Much like you, Neil Vanides. You're great people. You're great people for being on our show today. Thank you so much for being a guest on Good Story Live.
Thank you.
It's been great fun. And we'll catch up. Next time I'm in LA, we'll grab some coffee or something.
Absolutely. We could do a Warner Brothers tour.
Yes, I would love to do a Warner Brothers tour. Any tour, really. Any of the brothers.
Well, that's like 5 from my house. I'm just being lazy. Traffic here is
Oh, yeah. I've heard that.
And I'll leave you with that.
Folks, that was Neil Vanides, Hollywood actor who's he's a working actor. He's making his dream come true, and I have just enormous respect for him. Ginger, I'm glad you finally got to meet him.
Yes, me too. He was lovely. You were lovely, Neil. Lovely. It's a joy talking to you.
We're heading out here, but give us a preview of our next week's guest, Ginger.
Our next week guest is Stella Chang. She's an artist, watercolor artist, though she may do other things. And we have some fun things to share with you. She's absolutely lovely. I have one of her pieces, and I hope to share the story with you about that piece next week.
Oh, yes. There's a story behind it, and I don't even know the full story. I can't wait to hear it.
I know. I've been waiting. We're going to dive deep into the woo-woo-ness.
Oh, next week's going to get a little woo-woo.
Oh, yeah. It's going to come out in full force. So,
all right.
ready.
Fair enough. We'll be ready.
Okay.
Folks, this has been fun. Thanks for joining us on Good Story Live. We'll be back next Thursday. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the page if you feel so inclined. And go follow Neil as well. NeilVanides.com is his website. NeilVanides.com. And you can follow him on Instagram, on Twittergram, on Facegram, all the grams, really. And you can find out what he's doing next.
And you can see all of that stuff in the description below. And if you head over to Good Story Live, look for the date, the episode, everything you want to know. All the links will be there.
We'll see you next week, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.